All right, so this whole Michael Saylor MicroStrategy situation just got a lot more worse. So yesterday we covered on why Michael Saylor sold some of his Bitcoin, the reaction that the market had. As you can see, the market crashed about a 10% mover to the downside. And I told you guys here is that I have questions on whenever Michael Saylor is really a Bitcoin maximalist, or is he just doing this because his company was really not that successful? Does he really believe in Bitcoin? Is he planning to sell more in the future? Well, while I was diving a little bit further into it just got a whole lot worse, because the whole idea of MicroStrategy or strategy has been for the last couple of years that they buy Bitcoin, and through, for example, cash flow and taking on more debt, their whole idea is that if you buy their stock, you're able to accumulate more and more Bitcoin slowly, and they call this MNAV. So the whole idea is, and again, I'm not a financial advisor, I'm a random guy off the internet. This is just how I personally see it and what I can see from the internet. Personally, I do think strategy B could work out. It makes sense to me, but we have questions and I want to raise those questions, so I will talk about it here in this video. But basically, the whole idea is that, for example, if you have a certain amount of shares, then that leads to a certain amount of Bitcoin that is backed and then that's held by Michael Saylor's MicroStrategy, or strategy, whatever you want to call it. His new name is strategy, his old name was MicroStrategy. But again, the whole idea is that if you buy a certain amount of stocks, that equals a certain amount of Bitcoin. Now, historically, what has happened is that if you buy his stock, for example, Bitcoin is at $60,000, but his stock, if you have a total of $60,000 in MicroStrategy stocks, then depending on what the MNAV is, it depends on how much Bitcoin is actually backing the stock that you hold. So for example, if you are buying MicroStrategy stock and you have a certain amount of MicroStrategy stock, for example, you have $60,000 worth of stock and the Bitcoin price is $60,000, but they actually hold double the Bitcoin and what those Bitcoin is actually worth, then the amount of Bitcoin you hold per share is double that if you would just go to the spot market and buy Bitcoin. So this is called MNAV. So for example, during a bull run, the MNAV here has been higher. So you can see that during the last bull run here, sometimes the MNAV was about 2.7 and sometimes it was around 2, which means that if you bought MicroStrategy stock at that time, technically you would be holding double the amount of Bitcoin and if you just go to the spot market. So sometimes it's trading above MNAV, which means that if you are a Bitcoin maximalist and you bought Michael Saylor's his stock and you bought it somewhere on the bottom and his MicroStrategy company outperforms the Bitcoin price, then you hold more Bitcoin compared to if you just went on the spot market. But what has been happening here for the last couple of weeks and months is that the MNAV has been going down. And now, if you actually hold Michael Saylor his MicroStrategy stock, you would actually have lost compared to if you just have held Bitcoin. So this is what MNAV means. Now, if the MNAV is above what the Bitcoin value is actually worth, then that allows him to sell his stock and buy more Bitcoin through that. Now, he also has a secondary stock option, and this company is called Stretch, so STR. They give you an annual dividend of about 11.5%. So through this, they also take on more debt. So they promise people to give them a dividend of about 11.5%. And the whole idea is that if you give them money, they give you a return. And with that money, they buy more Bitcoin. Now, the idea of this is that Bitcoin tends to go up more than the 11.5%. So on average, Bitcoin goes up about 50% each year if you stretch it out. So the whole idea is that, we give you 11.5%, but Bitcoin is eventually way going to outperform that. Now, the problem with that is that he has taken on so much debt, and now we're in this bear market. Now, if you actually look at what the amount of cash is that Michael Saylor, his MicroStrategy, Strategy B, whatever you want to call it, actually holds, currently, you can see that the reserves here are about 900 million, but he has to pay about $1.7 billion each year. That means that he has enough reserves to pay out this dividend for the next 6 months, but after that, he's going to be running out of cash to pay for the dividends, which means that he can only do one thing, and that is sell Bitcoin or sell stock. But because the MNAV is currently trading below parity, the only thing that he can possibly do is sell Bitcoin, because if he's going to start selling his stock, then the whole purpose of buying MicroStrategy stock and buying it to outperform Bitcoin will basically go flush down the toilet, because at that point in time, you could have better just bought Bitcoin at the spot than just buy his stock and self-custody your Bitcoin. So again, the whole idea of his company is you buy their stock, and through that, it's going to outperform Bitcoin, so you're able to accumulate more Bitcoin into the future through this process on taking on more debt. But with the MNAV currently being this low, he can't really sell his stock, and the only thing he can do is to sell Bitcoin. Now, this is what people are basically talking about. And that here you can see his USD reserves is down 60% to 800 million. So that means he had a lot more reserved. His annual dividend obligation went from 800 million to 1.6 billion. And then his reserve coverage shrank from 30 months to 7 months. So again, his reserve before this, according to this guy, Perry999, and you can see here some of the evidence here, that it used to cover about 30 months of dividends. So he had enough months to, to basically sit out an entire Bitcoin cycle, or like 2/3 of a Bitcoin cycle. And now he has only enough money to pay dividends for 7 months. And now this is the whole thing, is that the stretch is now trading below par at $97. So we're not going to get into the whole thing, but he's basically screwed. He's going to have to sell some of his Bitcoin to be able to fund these dividends. He has taken on so much leverage at this point in time, and he's promised so much returns that because of this bear market, he has to sell some of his Bitcoin to fund that. Now, does that absolutely mean that everything is just going to zero and he's going to go bankrupt when he runs out of money? No, because he still has the Bitcoin. So this, and we do have to be honest, we don't have to necessarily call this a Ponzi scheme or a scam or anything like that. It just means that he has taken on a significant amount of debt. He's taking on a lot of risk. This can work out if the bond market implodes or we see the Fed coming out and putting a bunch of money. This can potentially work out, but he is taking on a bunch of risk, and he has 7 months left before he runs out of cash. He has to either raise new cash to pay off the dividends, or he's going to have to sell some of his Bitcoin, some of his reserves. Now, some people are drawing a similarity between Luna and MicroStrategy, which I don't really take, because MicroStrategy is actually backed by Bitcoin. They hold a significant amount of Bitcoin, but Bitcoin is still a real asset. It is still functioning. It is still an alternative to your fiat system. So he does have real assets to back his payment. He can sell some of his Bitcoin. But again, he's taken on an immense amount of leverage. Now, how this could work out very badly is if Bitcoin just goes sideways and down and people are generally negative because of the whole situation and worried about buying Bitcoin and worried about what he's selling, he can actively put negative sell pressure on Bitcoin that really shouldn't be there. So what we're looking at right now is that if Bitcoin just suddenly pumps to the upside, this would all probably be fine. There will be enough demand. But if we go sideways or this bear market just extends here for another year, he's going to have to sell a significant amount of Bitcoin. And if we can see already what the reaction was to him selling this little bit of Bitcoin, is people are worried. Like, this is having serious negative effects here on the price. So the whole idea of MNEF is, again, here on BitcoinTreasury.net. It's saying here, so this is an independent site. It's saying about 0.9%. And I think generally this is how they calculate it. But if you go to MicroStrategy, his own website, they calculate MNEF at 1.23%, which is very weird because their Bitcoin is their actual cost basis of Bitcoin is currently below to what they actually invested in. So the amount that they bought is that, well, they're currently in a loss. So how could you have a higher MNEF? So apparently the way how they calculate it is a little bit weird. So I don't really know the necessary calculation, but apparently it's trading currently below MNEF. MicroStrategy says it's not, so he could potentially sell stock according to his own calculations. But the independent websites say that this MNEF is below parity. So it's about -7 below parity. So some people are stating that the US government is going to bail it out, that they're going to use Michael Saylor to go bankrupt, and then they're going to buy off his Bitcoin, which could potentially happen. I mean, some people are definitely speculating a lot, but what I'm pretty much predicting here right now is that he's either going to have to sell some of his stock in order to make sure that Bitcoin just doesn't crash further to the downside. He's going to have to hope Bitcoin will just pump to the upside in the next 7 months or something like that. And he's probably going to have to sell some Bitcoin during this bear market, because this thing can still go on for like a year, maybe even a year and a half in the worst example. And that means he's going to have to cover about 18 months of dividends. He has 7 months of cash left. He's going to have to get cash somewhere to actually fund these dividends. Now, he could, again, this is what we talked about in the last video, he could sell some of his Bitcoin. This is not a Ponzi scheme. This is not a scam, because he has real assets that are backing his company. He can sell some of his Bitcoin. But what is that going to be the result on, for example, his stock? Are people still going to be willing to really buy it during a bull run? Are people still willing to take the risk when during a bear market, this whole thing can just suddenly cause Michael Saylor to have to sell a significant portion of his Bitcoin? That is really the big question here moving forward. I don't think that this is a very positive thing for his stock. I think he has taken on too much leverage, and it could work out if the Fed just prints a bunch of money, because then it's just going to be Bitcoin is just going to do incredibly well. Again, I have very much doubt that this is going to be having a positive impact on him and his company. So what is going to happen for the Bitcoin price is that we're probably going to have an extended, longer bear market. We're going to have more fear, and people are going to be more worried about buying Bitcoin. But again, I don't necessarily think that his company is a Ponzi scheme or anything like that, and Bitcoin will probably eventually recover. But for now, it has a very negative effect, and yeah, it does look a lot worse than I initially expected. They don't have a lot of cash left to pay these dividends, so eventually they're going to have to sell stock. They're going to have to change the dividend that they're going to pay out. They're going to have to sell some Bitcoin, but in my opinion, likely sell some Bitcoin. So this is probably why he sold Bitcoin, and why I think that this is probably going to be happening more in the future. But we'll eventually see what happens. We still have the Federal Reserve that is probably going to print money eventually in the next few decades. Decades, I mean years moving forward. So we have plenty of time to wait. And I'm not really that worried, but this is definitely negative for Bitcoin. And it is going to cause probably more problems along the road. So that's basically it here for this video and this update here for today. Again, make sure to like and subscribe, and hope to see you guys here in my next video. Bye bye.